Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Chesapeake Public Schools Family Empowerment Webinar. My name is Lisa Carey, and I am a Family and Community Engagement Specialist with FACE. Our office, which is the Department of Engagement, aims to build meaningful partnerships that inspire, engage, and empower families, educators, and community organizations to support the initiatives of Chesapeake Public Schools. We are typically available Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. You can also reach us by our main phone line at 757-482-5923 or via email at FACE at cpschools.com. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to our continued partnership. We are happy that you're here for our final mental health series. Before we begin, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the Chesapeake Public Schools YouTube channel. Please note that participants' cameras and the chat feature are disabled. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. We'll address all questions at the end of the presentation. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to the Women's Chamber of Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce, Chesapeake, and the City of Chesapeake for their invaluable support with this initiative. Their partnership helps ensure that our families have access to the knowledge, tools, and resources necessary to address mental health while breaking down stigmas. I am honored to introduce our distinguished presenters. First, we have Dr. Patricia King, a psychiatrist with King and Associates. Dr. King is a graduate of Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee, and brings over 30 years of experience in mental health. She is affiliated with numerous community service organizations, including the American Medical Association, Greater Norfolk Medical Society, Norfolk Links Incorporated, the Women's Division of the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce, Chesapeake, and Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. In addition to holding several leadership positions and receiving numerous accolades, Dr. King was recently elected to serve on the Chesapeake City Council. Also joining Dr. King tonight is Mrs. Tawana Fortune, Supervisor of Student Conduct and Support for Chesapeake Public Schools. Mrs. Fortune is a graduate of Hampton University and the University of Delaware, where she earned both her master's degree and master's specialist degree in school psychology. With over 35 years of experience, she is accomplished professionally and received many awards and certificates. She also is the owner of Fortune Life Coaches, LLC, and the author of 2 books, Getting Past Myself and Release Your Treasures. Additionally, Ms. Fortune is a certified equity coach, certified coach practitioner, and a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. As you can see, our presenters bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to tonight's topic. Welcome, ladies, and thank you for being here tonight. At this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Dr. King.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. And good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us. This is a great opportunity for us to talk about a topic that really should be of interest to all of us. And I'm so happy that you are here to participate. So tonight we will be talking about the challenges our children are facing in mental health, some of the contributing factors, and how we can possibly intervene. Next slide. Our children truly are our future. Their health, physical and mental, should be our priority, and it is our responsibility. Next slide. So what are some of the factors that are contributing to the mental health crisis that we are witnessing? There's no quick or simple answer. There are many factors that come into play. And so today we'll be taking a look at some of them. We'll be starting with social media, family stressors, abuse, educational demands and disruptions, substance use, and COVID-19, and how they are all contributing to the mental health crisis that we are seeing. Next slide. We've heard a lot lately about the ill effects of social media on our children, and no doubt there are some positives, but for the sake of today's conversation, we will be talking about the potentially harmful impacts of social media. Fairly recently, the Journal of the American Medical Association published an article on brain changes seen in children and adolescents who frequently check social media. The areas of the brain involved are the amygdala and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And both of these areas are very important when it comes to behavior, rewards, and punishment. We also know that there's less engagement in exercise, sports, and social activities when there's excessive social media use. So this can lead to deficits in social and emotional learning. And without social media limitations, children and adolescents can be exposed to constant criticism, verbal attacks, and bullying. This can all occur with limited control. Also, there are recent studies that indicate that excessive exposure can lead to poor mental health outcomes, which includes increases in anxiety and depression, as well as a distorted body image, which can lead to eating disorders, which we are seeing fairly commonly in children and adolescents as well. Poor mental health outcomes are greater in those who are spending 4 or more hours per day on social media. And a recent survey indicated that about 41% of the highest social media users report poor or very poor mental health. Next slide. We know that the time spent on social media can interfere with academics, with study time, and with sleep. All of this can lead to problems with physical health, as well as deterioration in mental health. Some recent studies are even showing higher rates of substance use in high volume social media users. Next slide. So this has come to the attention of the higher ups, and there have been multiple attempts by multiple entities to try to address these issues. So the American Psychological Association has issued 10 guidelines regarding social media use. The U.S. Surgeon General's office issued an advisory back in 2021. Governor Youngkin's K-12 recent cell phone ban in Virginia public schools has been an attempt on his part to try to manage social media use, especially in the school setting. And also, Governor Youngkin has called to lawmakers to raise the age of social media use. And that recently has been done in Australia, which banned social media use to anyone under the age of 16. And New York City filed a suit against TikTok, Meta, Snap, and YouTube. And they allege that this is interfering with the children's mental health and causing undue and unnecessary taxing on the school system in an attempt to try to manage the mental health issues that they are seeing as a result. Next slide. So we also know that family stressors can play a significant part in mental health issues. Absent parents. Parents can be absent for a multitude of different reasons. It could be because they're working. It could be because they have their own emotional issues or stressors that they're dealing with. But absent parents are a major stressor for children. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. We know that as the economy is strained and unstable, that it creates housing instability and food insecurity, as well as family discord. We also tend to see higher rates of domestic violence and substance abuse. And all of these we know are critical factors that impact our children in many, many ways. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the different types of abuse that our children are experiencing. Oftentimes we think about abuse and we think of physical abuse, but abuse can come in a multitude of different forms. And yes, it can include physical abuse, but also sexual, verbal, emotional abuse, as well as neglect. And yes, neglect is a form of abuse. And the more we experience stress in our family situations, we're going to see more abuse. And this is something that we noticed during COVID-19. There was an increase in child abuse during that time. And actually, it has continued. We're continuing to see pretty high numbers of abuse. And it makes sense that abuse contributes to mental health and can cause some significant issues in our children, their behavior, as well as just their emotions. Next slide. Sometimes educational stressors are self-inflicted, especially in high achievers, but there are also systemic educational stressors, particularly for those who have learning disabilities and learning challenges. There are stressors related to test taking, to SOLs, to learning loss that we experienced during COVID, fear of failure, parental pressure to perform, and even discrimination. Oftentimes, the educational demands interfere with engagement in extracurricular activities, which are so essential to mental and physical resilience. Next slide. We know that the teenage years are a very critical time in brain development, and exposure to substances such as those listed, alcohol, marijuana, vaping, pain medications, and other substances can be very harmful to developing brains, to neuronal connections, and overall functions of the brain. We also see that oftentimes our teenagers and even children misuse pain medications. Oftentimes these pain medications are obtained from family members who maybe have pain medicines from a previous surgery or condition that has been treated. And so, we're seeing children and adolescents using pain medications that are not prescribed for them for medical reason. There are also other substances that are being misused, like stimulants and benzodiazepines that would include like Xanax and Valium and medications of that nature. We all must make a concerted effort to keep our personal prescription medications, especially those that are controlled, out of the reach of our youth. Next slide. I think we'd be remiss tonight not to talk at least briefly about COVID-19. And COVID-19 did exacerbate mental health conditions in our children and teens, but we were already facing a mental health crisis even prior to COVID-19, and that mental health crisis has continued. Social isolation in the family, deaths and illness, disruption to education, the uncertainty surrounding COVID-19, the inactivity as members of the family and children and adolescents were confined to home. There was an increase in social media use, which we spoke about in terms of how detrimental it could be. And also there was compromised nutrition as the kids who depended on the school system for nutritional meals, oftentimes were not getting nutritional meals during COVID-19 when they were at home. So you can see that all of these factors created a perfect storm or a cesspool for mental illness in our youth. Next slide. These are some of the conditions that we're seeing with anxiety disorders and depression at the top of the list. Those are the most common mental health conditions that we are seeing in our youth. We are seeing the other conditions too, but not as prevalently as we are seeing the anxiety disorders and depression. Even in very young children, we're seeing just a very high volume of anxiety and depression. So we'll spend a little more time talking about those. But in addition to anxiety disorders and depression, we're also seeing attention deficit disorder, autism spectrum disorder, obsessive compulsive disorders, disruptive behavioral disorders, which a lot of the teachers were reporting when the kids returned after COVID-19, and eating disorders that I mentioned earlier, and the impact of social media on body distortion, creating potential eating disorders in young people. Next slide. So what are the anxiety disorders that we are seeing? We're seeing separation anxiety, and I'll just briefly describe what each anxiety disorder characterizes. Separation anxiety is intense fear of separating from caregivers or loved ones. Oftentimes, this is seen in younger children who cry and are very distraught, separated from their parents when they drop them off from school, and they don't adjust well to a classroom setting. A lot of times, these kids end up being educated at home. Specific phobias really describes children or adolescents who are fearful of a specific thing, like spiders or elevators. And so it's a specific phobia related to an identified object. Social anxiety disorder refers to intense anxiety in social settings. Oftentimes, these kids are not able to go to school, to sit in the classroom, because of the extreme anxiety that can really impair them in their ability to learn. Not unusual for these young people to also be educated at home, just due to high levels of extreme anxiety. Generalized anxiety disorder refers more to people who have excessive worry and anxiety about a multitude of different things, not a specific object. And panic disorder refers to discrete episodes of significant anxiety. It can come on related to a specific event or item, or it can come completely out of the blue. And it's characterized by rapid heart rate, shortness of breath, intense fear, and a desire to remove oneself from whatever environment they're in at the time. Some people have panic disorders on a daily basis, multiple times a day, and others less frequently, but it can be very disruptive. And agoraphobia, we say, is fear of the marketplace, and this describes people who have a hard time leaving home. They're fearful of the outside world. Oftentimes, they're trapped in their homes. And selective mutism, we see this more commonly in young children who are unable to speak in certain settings. They generally are able to speak in environments that they're very comfortable, but unable to speak in certain other environments. Next slide. And so I really want to talk about depression. This is something that I'm seeing a lot in my practice, and a lot of my colleagues are seeing it as well. And once again, even in very young people, depression in adolescence may look a little different from what you may see in adults and older people. And you see anger listed here. Anger is one of those characteristics of depression that you do see fairly commonly in adolescents. But all of these are characteristics that you can see in young children, adolescents, and even adults who are suffering from depression. Sad, irritable, tearful, loss of interest in previously enjoyed activities, changes in appetite, which could be an increase in appetite or decrease in appetite. Most typically with depression, you see a decrease in appetite. Changes in sleeping patterns, and that could be sleeping too much or sleeping too little. Oftentimes people with depression tell you they just are unable to sleep at night and they never feel refreshed. And they're tired even though they're not able to sleep. And then fatigue, oftentimes people who are depressed will just tell you they don't have any energy. Even showering or washing their hair seems like it's overwhelming. It takes too much energy. Self-loathing, just low self-esteem, not feeling worthy. Anger, we mentioned, especially in adolescents, but can be seen in all age groups. And suicidal thoughts and even suicide attempts can be a result of depression, and especially depression that is not treated. Next slide. So here are some pretty startling statistics that I thought I would share with you. About 50% of teens spend 4 or more hours on screens. About 40% of children report feeling sad or hopeless. 16% of children have made a suicide plan, and about 9% have attempted suicide. 22% of our children report drinking alcohol in the last 30 days, and 17% report using marijuana. We talked earlier about ensuring that your medications and controlled medications are out of the reach of your children. And along the same lines, we want to make sure that we secure our alcohol so that our kids do not have access to that. When it comes to the marijuana use, what I've noticed, and many of my colleagues who have shared with me, we've noticed that since marijuana was legalized in Virginia, or decriminalized technically, that a lot of our children are being exposed to marijuana at very young ages. And because their parents have access to it and feel more free about using it, that kids are often exposed to it when they shouldn't be. I've had a few teachers even tell me that the kids are coming to school smelling like marijuana, not necessarily because they've been smoking it, but because maybe they were driven by their parents or adults who were smoking it, either in the home or on the way to school. So that is something we really want to pay attention to, because all of the studies indicate that marijuana does have a harmful effect on developing brains. 50% of all lifetime mental health conditions actually begin before the age of 14. 37% of youth with mental health conditions, 14 and older, end up dropping out of school. 70% of youth in the juvenile justice system have mental illness. Next slide. And this is a very startling statistic. Suicide is the third leading cause of death in 10 to 20-year-olds. Of all causes of death, it is number 3. 90% of youth who die by suicide had a mental health disorder. Rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide are higher among LGBTQ plus youth, who oftentimes face discrimination, bullying, and anorexia has a higher mortality than any other mental health disorder, even as compared to depression. Next slide. So I think, again, we'd be remiss not to talk a little bit about the opioid crisis, because it has had a tremendous impact on our children and adolescents, as well as adults, so across the board, all ages. Between 2019 and 2020, the overdose death rates increased by 49% in 15 to 24-year-olds, so almost by 50%. Between 2019 and 2020, the overdose rate doubled among Black youth. Nearly 1/2 of people with substance use disorders started their substance use before the age of 14, which is another reason why we need to be really careful about what we expose young people to. Nearly 3/4 of overdose deaths among adolescents involve illegally manufactured fentanyl. Fentanyl is deadly in extremely small amounts, and it's coming into this country from other countries. There's a big effort that's being made to try to manage and control the production and availability of this very deadly drug. Oftentimes it's mixed in with marijuana and even sometimes medications, and this can be very devastating to young people. About 6% of young people who received an opioid prescription from a dentist became addicted within a year. So dentists are now on high alert as well about prescribing pain medications, especially to young people. And we're looking at alternative ways to treat pain, especially due to extractions, because we know that there are fairly high percentage of young people who do develop an addiction to opioids that initially are prescribed by the dentist for a legitimate reason. Next slide. So what are some of the warning signs that we should be aware of? When we see that our children are having mood swings, that their sleeping habits have changed, that they become more isolated, if you have students who have gone from really high achieving, doing well academically, to losing interest in school, performing poorly, self-destructive behaviors, sometimes, cutting, which is something we commonly see in young people, self-destructive behaviors like substance use. When you notice that maybe their personal care is not up to par, they're no longer concerned about their appearance or their hygiene, they become apathetic, or sometimes in young people and adolescents, they have what we call somatic symptoms. Somatic symptoms are physical symptoms related to mental health conditions, more headaches, more stomach aches, nausea, back pain, sometimes very undescript physical symptoms can all be warning signs of an underlying mental health condition. Next slide. There are trained mental health professionals who are able to treat all of the different conditions that we discussed today. And with those warning signs, it would really be imperative, helpful, encouraged to at least seek out an assessment by a trained mental health professional. It's better to be safe than to be sorry. And who are those trained professionals? Psychiatrists like myself. Psychiatrists are medical doctors. They have 4-year degrees from an undergraduate institution. They have 4 years of medical school training and then 4 years of residency training in specifically psychiatry. And then there are psychologists. And oftentimes people get psychiatrists and psychologists mixed up. The key difference is that psychiatrists are medical doctors and psychologists have a PhD. And then there are nurse practitioners who are nurses and then are trained to be clinicians, to make assessments, to prescribe medications. And they've been a real asset to the medical field in all areas of medicine. Then there are also physician assistants who usually complete 4 years of college and then approximately 2 years of specialty training, medical training. They are also authorized to do assessments and prescribe medications. And again, a real asset to the medical profession, especially because we are facing a severe shortage in mental health providers, especially physicians, primary care, as well as psychiatrists. There are also licensed clinical social workers who can do assessments and provide therapeutic interventions, and licensed professional counselors who are able to do the same. But the licensed clinical social workers and professional counselors are not able to prescribe medications and psychotropic medications, but they are qualified to make assessments and to provide treatment from a therapeutic standpoint. Next slide. So what can we do? There are actually lots of things we can do to intervene. We can certainly encourage open communication with our children. We need to stay involved with them, their activities. We need to check in with them regularly. This is really where family meals come into play. We don't really see a lot of that anymore, but that was always a time when you could check in with your children to see how they're doing, to be made aware of any problems they're having or any issues. So even if it's not at a family meal, we still have to really make an effort to try to stay in touch and involved with our children and what they're doing. All the evidence is there that we truly need to limit social media use in our children. We need to keep them involved in social activities so that they can learn social skills. We need to keep them involved in physical activities so that they can be physically healthy, because physical and mental health go hand in hand. It is important to prioritize family time, make sure that there is time allotted to stay in close contact with your children. It's important that we know who our children are spending time with, where they are, what they're doing. And this is very important that we model the behaviors we want to see in our youth. So if you don't want to see your children smoking marijuana, it is probably better that you don't smoke marijuana around them, because they learn more from what they see you doing than from what you say. And so we should always be mindful that we are role models for our children, and our behaviors should always reflect what we want from them. Next slide. All of our feelings okay. As human beings, we have a multitude of different feelings, from happiness to sadness and anger. And so that's a given. What's important is what we do with those feelings. Next slide. So mental health is important, and it's important for all the reasons that we've mentioned. And as I've stated, mental health and physical health go hand in hand. And it is our responsibility as adults, as parents, as educators, as role models to set an example and to be aware of what is going on with our children. And it's our responsibility to make sure that they are healthy physically and mentally. Next slide. Mental health matters. And yes, our youth are facing a serious mental health crisis. As we've stated, is related to a multitude of different factors, not any one isolated thing. It is up to all of us to protect our children and to set limits. And we must be vigilant about the warning signs that we mentioned. And if we see these warning signs, we need to seek professional help as soon as possible. It is better to err on the side of safety than not. And again, we are role models for our youth, and our behavior is important. And an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Anything is possible when you have the right people there to support you. And for our children, the right people include our teachers, our educators, our families, our parents, any other adults who play an intricate part in your children's lives, and our community. So I want to thank you all for being present this evening. Hopefully you've learned some things, and I'm going to now turn this over to my counterpart, Tawana Fortune.
And good evening. Thank you so much, Dr. King, for sharing with us the different types of diagnoses that perhaps sometimes students have. And you shared those symptoms, which are really, really important for parents to really put that third eye. Sometimes we look at some of the symptoms and we think, oh, it's nothing big about that. But when we start to culminate some of those symptoms together, that's when it's really, really important to seek some of those professional services providers that she indicated. One thing that I want to say is that, you know, when we think about our school, we think about our school climate, our school culture, and even our school safety. And when we think about school safety, we think about physical safety. So you think about, you know, we have fire drills and we have tornado drills, right? But there's also the space of feeling safe. So we have what we call physical safety, but we also have what we call psychological safety. And a lot of times as students are just exhibiting some of this symptomology within our school setting, it can impact what I call our ABCs. That would be our attendance, because, you know, we do have mandates for attending school. It can impact their behaviors, but it can also impact their course requirements. So when we think about attending, behaviors, and course requirements, that's like the crust of what we do in school. So we want to make sure that we let you all know that in Chesapeake Public Schools, we are really, really trying to move to the moment where we know that mental health matters, and that we have some different efforts within our school division that we are looking at that. And I just wanted to share that with you. So we have a safety and security task force, and within that task force, we have a mental health and wellness subcommittee. Within that subcommittee, it includes our school counselors, our school social workers, our school psychologists. It also includes our outer agency support mechanism. So we have someone from Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health, from the Pavilion of CHKD, from Kempsfield. We have other entities that come and help us to have a collective view of what it is that we think that our students really require in order to move through their daily regime of being a student, but also acknowledging, as Dr. King indicated, that there are some instances where there are so many stressors in life that sometimes it does move into some of the symptomologies of diagnoses. The one thing that I really want to input is that we do now have a student wellness link on our Chesapeake Public Schools website. If you go under students, In that link access, it will show you all of the mental health agencies that we have that have been vetted by the city of Chesapeake, which means it has been vetted by Chesapeake Public Schools. So if you get the opportunity, please make sure that you go to our CPS website, look under students, and there's a student wellness link. And that indicates to you all of the vetted mental health agencies that you may use for your students or your children if you feel like there are some symptomologies that they're showing. The other piece I want you to know is that we have school-based mental health providers. That's our school social workers, our school psychologists, our counselors, and even our student engagement resource counselors out of the Office of Student Conduct and Support. And they can provide connections to families for mental health service providers. Now, the Virginia Department of Education calls us school-based mental health, but we're not able to do what we would call clinical practicing. We can do educationally relevant counseling as it speaks to perhaps work completion, maybe some school-based related stressors, but we're not licensed in order to do the clinical counseling that Dr. King had indicated. So these are more school-related areas that we can have some type of input in as far as your students. I do want you to know that we do suicide risk assessments. They are done by our school counselors. They can be done by our school psychologists and or our school social workers. And those suicide risk assessments will give us a rating of how a student may feel about self-harm indicators. And if those self-harm indicators are seen as clinical, there is contact immediately with the parent, and there are resources to determine how to best meet your child's needs. We also have behavioral threat assessments in the event that we have students who make threats, and that could be towards their peers as far as students, it could be towards teachers and staff, or it could be towards the community. We have behavioral threat assessments where each school is mandated by the Department of Criminal Justice Services to have a behavioral threat assessment team. And that's a team of 5 people that involve not only our admin, but someone who can do counseling. So that could be a psychologist, a school social worker, or a counselor. We have our SRO, and we would have a teacher. And in that assessment, we look at the student's background as far as their academics and their behavior, any discipline, and we can come up with risk levels for behavioral threat assessment. So we want you to know that we take threats very seriously here, and we have those assessments done. We also have what we call a drug and alcohol prevention program. Using vapes at this time is against policy 9-21. So those students who have a first offense have to attend our 2-day drug and alcohol prevention program, which is located at our Chesapeake Center for Student Success. We also have school counselors now who have access to Vector modules, and these Vector modules actually give our students a mental health literacy. So say, for instance, a student came in and there were some concerns about anxiety. There are Vector modules that the school counselor can sit down and watch with the students to give them what we call mental health literacy, because a lot of times our students are at a space where they have feelings, but they're not able to put the terminology to it. So having that mental health literacy really helps them to express themselves, not only in understanding for self, but also perhaps for a peer or even for a family member. Also, our school counselors have been trained on mental health matters. We are bringing in experts to help us in learning the different types of diagnoses that Dr. King indicated and those symptomologies. Our school-based mental health providers also have professional development. And then one of the most important parts is that we have an employee assistance program for our school staff themselves, because all of us as humans go through moments that are stressful. I say that we all have what I call our treasure chest, and within our treasure chest, sometimes we have our own family stressors, we can have our own work stressors, and just like they say on an airline, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first so that you can help self before you can help others. So we definitely have the EAP for our own staff, for their own mental health issues, as far as just work production or how they feel about other indicators of their own life, as well as for those that are in their families. So you can see that Chesapeake Public Schools is really putting forth effort to make sure that we move through our own professional development in order to be service providers to our students. But we also know that we have to do the other types of risk assessments for our students who come in sometimes with self-harm thoughts or thoughts to hurt others. So these are wraparound services that we can provide in our school provisions. The one thing that I can say is that we are an educational institution. So we are not at the space where we are providing mental health clinical services, but we do know that we need to make sure that we connect our students to those right services that are providers in our community. So at this point, we're actually open. If there are any questions that you'd like to place in the chat, we would certainly love to answer those questions. So please feel free to type those.
Thank you so much. It looks like we do have some questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first question that we have, what are the most common emotional, social, or academic changes you see in children transitioning into middle school, and how can parents or educators distinguish between normal adjustments and signs of deeper challenges?
Okay, and so I think I'll take that one. What are we seeing during transitional periods? This doesn't just apply to children. It applies to people in general who are going through transitions. It tends to be a stressful time, and we all need to be equipped with coping skills. And so what are the things that we need to be aware of when you start seeing impairment in functioning, when you start seeing significant anxiety, or a child, like we mentioned earlier, who becomes more isolated, who isn't enjoying the things they used to enjoy, who's withdrawn, who maybe has changes in their sleeping patterns or eating patterns. So a drastic change from normal behavior is always a red flag. And so what we encourage parents to do, and educators as well, is to help provide coping skills for your children when they're going through major transitions.
If
All right.
if I could just add to that, Dr. King, the other piece that we really have to recognize between fifth graders and sixth graders is that as a fifth grader, you're coming from that very secure space of one teacher. And then when you move to that middle school setting, you're moving to more than one teacher, which means you have a different group of kids each period or block. You have a different teacher. Now you're moving in between classes. So sometimes it may take a student in the sixth grade an entire semester, really, to get used to just all of the change. Because in the fifth grade, you stay in the same class, you got the same seat, you got the same friends. But when we move into that middle school transition, your community grows. And when your community grows, you're forced, we call it a forced choice, right? You're forced to have more communication with people. Now you're working in small groups of people. And so you got to give our kids just some time to make that transition for more of that comforted, what we call it the soft comforts of elementary school. Then when we move to middle school, some of those what we call levels of maturity sort of kind of have to pop in, right? In order for them to just get acclimated to that type of educational setting.
Next question. If I can't afford counseling, what sort of free resources are there?
Luana, do you want me to address that?
Yeah, you can, and then I can do.
Okay. And thank you for adding that too, about that transition from fifth to sixth grade, because that is a real critical one. And so what resources are there? Well, in Chesapeake, in every city, in Hampton Roads, we have a community service board, Virginia Beach Community Service Board, Chesapeake Community Service Board, Norfolk Community Service Board, and they offer services to people who are not able to pay or are not fully insured or insured. So there are resources in the city for people who are in need, who don't have financial resources for those types of services.
Ms. Fortune, do you have anything to add for that one?
So I think it's important that you, if your child is in Chesapeake Public Schools, to make sure that you either connect with your school counselor, you have your school social worker, because they are connected to resources within the city. And sometimes they have what we call sliding fee scales. So it's just important to first connect, right? To find out what type of services you think your child needs, and then moving through that process of do you have insurance? Do you need someone to help you in the area of applying for insurance? So there are lots of different people and agencies that can help you in that space. So don't let that be a precursor for you not to reach out. We definitely want you to still reach out, and we'll just find the right connector for you to find out how we can make sure that there's some type of service provided for your child.
Thank you. Next question. I try everything to get my child to talk to me, but it doesn't work. Do you have any strategies or suggestions?
And that is definitely an issue that we face with young people. And I'm just going to share a story with you. So I am seeing people today who are young adults, 20 to 25 or 30 years old. Their parents would drag them into my office when they were 10, 11, or 12, and they would absolutely refuse to come to engage with me because they didn't want to share how they felt or their personal business. And now they'll call and they'll say, I have to get in there. I need to talk to you. It's just interesting how a few years can make a really big difference. So it's not uncommon for young people to not really want to engage and share how they feel. But if you have a child who's having difficulty communicating with you and you have concerns, that would be a time to reach out to someone else. They may feel more comfortable with someone other than yourself. And so, like Ms. Fortune said, the school has resources. There may be an adult within the school system that your child connects with or trusts or has rapport with, and maybe they can be a good guide or leader for them. But I would reach out and utilize the resources. Maybe there's another family member who communicates better with your child or who your child may feel comfortable with. So I would look into services. I will look into utilizing resources and especially the school system. And then I would just be as encouraging as possible and provide as many opportunities as possible for that child to be able to talk to you, when they're comfortable doing that.
So I'm gonna be in a little level of transparency. I am in a blended family and I have a stepdaughter, and she came into my life when she was 5 or 6. And so I know we needed to communicate, but she was at a space where, I was new in her life. So I got a journal and we called it Pillow Talk. So I would ask her a question. What is your favorite color? And I said, I got something under your pillow, right? And she'd go get the book, she'd read the question, and then she'd give me the answer. Then I said, you ask me a question. So we ended up really having more communication in the pillow talk, really, before we had it in our face-to-face talk. And then it gradually moved to us having different types of conversations. And I tell you the best piece about that, because a lot of times when our kids come to us and they want to talk, we are thinking about what we're going to say before we listen to what they're saying, right? So when we have that space that they can write and then we can respond, everybody gets a time for what we call wait time, when it's time to have that conversation. So sometimes if it's not as clinical as Dr. King is indicating, because sometimes there are students who really need to have someone else outside of the family because there may be some family dynamics. But if you don't think it's that at that level, there are other ways that you can try to move through a lesser version of communication that may not feel as threatening for them. And we just called it Pillow Talk. We just had a journal and we just talked back and forth under the pillow.
Thank you. Next question. As a parent, how can I best support my child in managing the challenges of balancing academics, part-time work, social expectations, and their overall well-being without adding to their stress?
Juana, you want me to answer that? Okay. Well, that's one of the big challenges. And we talked about all of those stressors and how they contribute to deteriorating mental health. But the foundation for surviving and thriving in spite of stressors and challenges in life is, one, a strong support system. And that's family and teachers and community. And the other next thing would be strong coping skills, because all of those things that you mentioned are real positives. They help children to learn good time management skills, good social skills, resilience. And so the goal is not to stifle them in all of those areas, is to encourage all of those things, but to equip them with the foundation and the coping skills that they need to not allow those things to be harmful.
Ms. Borchardt, do you have anything to add to that one? Okay,
You can get that
Oh.
one right on target.
I agree. All right, it looks like that was our last question, and so I'm going to pass it over back to Lisa to wrap it up.
Thank you, Laura. Well, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to learn more about youth and mental health. We hope that you found this information very informative. I would like to thank Dr. King and Mrs. Fortune for sharing their expertise with us tonight. If you or someone you know is facing a mental crisis, please contact the suicide crisis. Please contact the suicide hotline at 988. This concludes our webinar for tonight. If you would like to see part 1 and part 2 of this series, please go to our Chesapeake Public Schools YouTube channel. Additionally, if you want to learn more about other events hosted by our district, please scan the QR codes located on the screen. Don't forget to download our app so that you can get all the updates and notifications about your child's school and the district. At the end of this webinar, you will receive a brief survey. Please take a moment to complete this so that we may know more about your interests. As always, remember, families and communities work better together. Thank you and have a great evening.